You guys are being really quiet, though. You're being really quiet. Well, so exactly 1 year ago today, this very day, I was laying in a hospital bed. I was wondering if I was going to need surgery. And in fact, I was wondering if, well, you know, how the surgery was going to go and if I was going to, you know, even live through it. That consideration was on my mind. And for 36 years of my life, I avoided going to the hospital. I mean, besides the occasional stomach bug and a couple of sprained ankles, I really, I was consistently healthy. It was, in fact, it was kind of like a badge of honor that I would mention if I found that it was fitting for the conversation. And I kind of mentioned the fact, you know, I've never even been to the hospital. I've only had a sprained ankle a couple of different times. Other than that, you know, go to the urgent care and, you know, take care of it, and I'm gone. But now, as I reflect upon my surgery and the lessons learned through that experience, I can see that my badge of honor that I have was really what it was. It was a facade for a badge of arrogance. And 1 year ago, I got punched in the gut, literally, not literally punched, but it was in the gut. But I had to come face to face with my frailty and with my mortality. It was a very odd experience, to be honest with you. It's very humbling. And God tested and taught me that the distance between life and death was much closer than I imagined. And the really scary part about it all is that I had no control over it whatsoever. I mean, here I was in the hospital for something didn't know was going on, and could not have done anything to keep it from happening. It's just no fault of mine, no fault. I mean, it's just literally being a part of a sinful world and the effects of sin takes on our bodies, and my body specifically. Had no control over it whatsoever. And on Friday, maybe it was specifically Friday, I think, when I thought about this, you know, I asked myself, when have I felt like I feel right now? When have I felt like I feel right now? And it wasn't long before I realized that that I felt like this, and probably like most of you, I felt like this a year ago. But this time it wasn't me, just me that was getting punched in the gut. It just wasn't Katie having to go through that experience with me, but it was all of us. It was everybody. We got punched in the gut. And we realized we're not in control. So again, I'm going to share a few thoughts from Scripture. If there's one syntax, and I'll read it. Now, I would say this one might be it, but we're going to jump around. You want to turn to 2 Corinthians chapter 5. Chapter 5, verse 1 through verse 9. For we know that if the tent that is our earthly home is destroyed, building from God, a house not made with hands, eternal in the heavens, for in this tent we groan, longing to put on our heavenly dwelling, if indeed by putting it on we may not be found naked. For while we are still in this tent, we groan, being burdened, not that we would be unclothed, but that we would be further clothed, so that what is mortal may be swallowed up by life. He who has prepared us for this very thing is God, who has given us the Spirit as a guarantee. So we are always of good courage. We know that while we are at home in the body, we are away from the Lord, for we walk by faith, not by sight. Yes, we are of good courage, and we would rather be away from the body and at home with the Lord. So whether we are at home or away, we make it our aim to please him. So if I had to sum up the fullness of my experience, and I would say you all would probably say the same thing. Maybe you would use a different words to describe it, but I feel like this is a good summation of the fullness of what we experienced this past week, and what we're experiencing now, and what we anticipate in the future. And that word that kind of encapsulates it all is, I think, uncertainty. The word uncertainty. In just a short period of time, our lives have drastically changed. I mean, I'm sitting in front of a camera looking to a camera, talking to it. A week and a half ago, never would have thought it would have happened. Wasn't even on the radar. Noah, who just went to the restroom after he was glad I told you that, but Noah went from going on spring break last Friday to realizing that he most likely already had the last day of his high school life in his senior year. My kids had to come to the realization yesterday that, we won't be eating at a restaurant anytime soon. And that was, kind of, I'm sure, disappointing for them. Glenn and Jenny wondered if they were going to be able to get back home in that uncertainty. I'm sure we've all wondered if we have coronavirus, and we can't really be sure. I could be sitting right here right now, and I could have it. I could have had it for 10 days. Maybe it's not affecting me, but I'm uncertain. I don't know. We've all had to think about things that we've thought about things this past week we've probably never thought about in our lives. And that's wild, I guess. And kind of the one question I think, and it kind of corresponds to what happened during the 1918 Spanish flu, is that there was two things that kind of that went on. I forget the pastor's name. He preached a sermon. It was I believe it was the 1st of November. It was the first time Washington, D.C. churches were able to meet again after the Spanish flu had hit. And he talked about the fact that, when you woke up in the morning, the very first thing that everyone wanted to know was, okay, how many deaths were there yesterday? And then the next question upon that was, when is it going to end? That situation kind of fast forward to now, though, hopefully, coronavirus doesn't turn out to be as deadly as the Spanish flu. Back then, there was, it shows you just this same pattern that we're people, and we need these certain things to help us get through the uncertainty of it all. And amid the uncertainty, we want something certain. We want something. That's why people are buying toilet paper like crazy, so they can have control over at least one thing: toilet paper. And that's why I've done it this week without realizing it. I'll hit the news channels and read for 1 or 2 hours about coronavirus, and In hindsight, I think back to that. I'm like, I was grasping for as much information as I could, as to give me a sense of having control over it, in one way or the other. It was just trying to find certainty in the midst of all the uncertainty that's going on. So, in light of all that, kind of here's what I'm certain of. And it comes from James chapter 4. James chapter 4, verses 13 through 16. It says this: "Come now, you who say today or tomorrow, we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit. Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogance. And all such boasting is evil." I'm certain, and I think this situation has brought us all to just face the reality that we do not know what tomorrow will bring. And it's in a new way, we don't know what tomorrow will bring. And there's a difference between saying that and knowing that, and then living like that. March 20, 2019, I still had my healthy badge of arrogance. I still had never been to the hospital. But the next day, that was ripped away. And I could do absolutely nothing about it. And it's kind of happened to us this week in a very similar fashion, very quickly. What we thought we were certain of and had been ripped away. And many things that, to be honest with you, just upon my reflection, many of the things that have been ripped away from me and probably you this past week, those things should have never really been grasped on too tightly anyways. They never really should have been in our hands. For instance, like the certainty of health, like we don't know whether we could wake up tomorrow and have all the symptoms of coronavirus, or whether it's coronavirus or not. The certainty of health is not in our hands. And we are frail. We are really weak. It doesn't take much to kill us. And the certainty of life is not in our hands either. We're mortal. We're mortal. And that's why the author says in Ecclesiastes 7 that it's better to go to the house of mourning, because this is the end of man. Consider it. Become face to face with that reality of who we are. Certainty, that thing we're grasping for, and that thing that we've lost, it was never really in our hands in the first place. It's never been in our hands. We're not God. Because certainty is, I was talking to the kids this week about, it's kind of like, why are we scared of the dark? We're scared of the dark. We're not, it's not necessarily like the dark we're scared of. It's, what's the difference between going outside during the day and going outside during the night? Well, at day, you can go outside, you can look around, front, behind you, on the side. You can see, okay, there's no scary animals beside you. And you're certain of it because you trust your eyes and trust what you see. And the darkness, what that does is it makes you uncertain. You can't look around behind you, in front of you, to the left or to the right, to see if there's anything there. You just don't know. You're uncertain. And you've lost this sense of control that you have. And that sense of control that we've lost, again, was never really there in the first place. You do not know, the author says, James says, you don't know what tomorrow will bring. And listen to it's not like they're making some bold claims, but how often does our language sound like this? I'm going to go such and such a town over here for a little while. I'm going to make some money. Now, it's not bad to plan, obviously. We should plan. We should make plans. But in light of our mortality, in light of the fact that we don't control tomorrow, we don't control anything. And certainty is not in our hands at all. And let that sink in. Let that, as Psalm 90, verse 12 says, let that teach us to number our days, that we may get a heart of wisdom. So let that teach us. Let just how fragile we are, how just the end of our days, which we will all experience. Let that give us a heart of humility, and rejoice in the things that we can enjoy today and that God has blessed us with today. Let that be on your heart and mind as we move forward. And this kind of corresponds to it. I had a thought about Jerry the other day, and he's sitting right next to me now. He came over. He's 6 feet away, just so everybody knows. But I thought to myself, I was like, I bet you this is not affecting Jerry to the same degree that is affecting many others, and possibly many of you and me. And I talked to Jerry yesterday about this. I couldn't put my finger on it. I couldn't nail it down. But Jerry lives day to day. Because of his situation, he isn't too concerned with chasing after many of the vanities of life that we often, they're not bad, but at the end of the day, we can't take them with us. And I couldn't put my finger on it until this morning when I read this. And I think we should all take light of this. And I talked to my parents last night too. My dad is 79. My mom's 75. And I wanted to know, kind of, they experienced something similar, to what's going on now. And really, they were really too young. I guess they were still kids when the most intense part of the Cold War was going on. But that's kind of the closest thing we could to bring it to, kind of that sense of uncertainty around the Cold War. It was a little different because, hey, if they nuke, then, you're not going to feel anything, pretty much. But, they talked about, it really didn't worry us too much about everything my parents said, because, we lived day to day. We had a garden. Life was kind of simple. And then kind of coming back to that and thinking about the fact that, the situation probably hasn't affected Jerry, and he agreed that it really hasn't, to the same degree that it seems to be affecting many others. And here's the text that that kind of put it home for me. It says, James chapter 1, verses 9 through 11. Let the lowly brother boast in his exaltation, and the rich in his humiliation. Because like a flower of the grass, he will pass away. For the sun rises when it scorches heat, with its scorching heat, and withers the grass. Its flowers fall, and its beauty perishes. So also will the rich man fade away in the midst of his pursuits. Let us not boast in the certainty of tomorrow. Let us not boast in the certainty of profit. Let us not set our hearts and our imaginations upon the dreams that we imagine. Those desires, even though they're good, they can't be ultimate. But it says, let us boast in our humiliation. In this text, the lowly brother is one who doesn't have much, and he looks forward to the day then he will have much, when his inheritance is with the Lord, and he goes to be with him. And so the lowly brother boasts in that exaltation, but the rich in his humiliation. And at least for myself, and maybe for you, been humiliated this week, been humbled, realizing some of the things that we chase after, some of the things that I've chased after, and that points us to boast with the lowly brother and look forward to the day of our future exaltation, of what's yet to come, and by that we ought to live for that, even in an even greater sense since everything that's happened. So the humiliation that we've gone through the past week and onward, I would say let it have its full effect. I remember when I was recovering from everything and surgery, it was long. It was slow, and I couldn't do much. I just pretty much just sat there, and it was all in the Lord's hands. And you feel super weak and just really vulnerable. Let that have its full effect. That same thing is happening now. Let that humiliation just do its work in us. Let it teach us to number our days. And let it also remind us that we live in a world still groaning from the effects of sin. I sit here at church and you sit there at your house. And today that's happening because of sin. Disease and sickness and death are only realities because of sin. Our separation today is a reality because that is what sin does. It separates things. It separates things that are meant to be together. From the very beginning, sin separated us from God and from each other. And at the very core of this pandemic, the very core of it is separation. 6 feet of it or more. Keep a distance. So let this be a lesson. Every time you experience a separation, every time you long to be with others and be close to others that you can't be with, or at this point in time, let that be a lesson. Let it remind us, and let it be an opportunity for us to weep over how our sin separates us from God and others. Let this time also produce in you a longing for when we can be face to face again. That we're no longer separated again. We have to do this via virtually. And let that conjure, let that build in us. I mean, think of why we even come together in the first place if it's not for what the Lord has done to bring us back to him and to reconcile us to him through his son, Jesus Christ. So let it teach us to never take for granted the opportunity to worship the Lord together as one body. 1 Thessalonians 2, verses 17 through 18, it says, Paul told the Thessalonians, "But since we were torn away from you, brothers, for a short time, in person, not in heart, we endeavored the more eagerly and with great desire to see you face to face, because we wanted to come to you, I, Paul, again and again, but Satan hindered us." So let's not only long to worship face to face with each other again. That's not only for our joy and for our encouragement, but let us not be fooled by how the God of this world, Satan, has and will attempt to deceive and discourage us as we are separated. And I'm sure he's already done that. Finally, let this temporal separation have its effect in us in this way. And this is the primary way it should affect us. 2 Corinthians 5, 6, and 7. For we know that while we are at home in the body, we are away from the Lord. For we walk by faith and by sight. Let all this separation that we experience be a reminder that the only certain hope we have, the only certain thing that we can grasp onto, is when we are no longer separated from God the Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. When that becomes a reality, we can meet him face to face. When there is no more sin, disease, or separation. The only certain hope we have is that though we die, yet we shall live. The only certain hope we have is when what is perishable is swallowed up by what is imperishable. Look, we have an immovable anchor for our soul. We have a certain hope that is promised to us by God. He's promised this hope, the hope of eternal life with him, dwelling with him, where we can be his people, and he can be our God, and he will dwell among us. There will be no more separation, no more sin that we're experiencing today. We have a certain hope that has entered into the inner place behind the curtain. We have a certain hope that has ripped the curtain in two. We have a certain hope that is seated at the right hand of God. We have a certain hope that upholds all things by the word of his power. Even right now, he's upholding all things by the word of his power. Even right now, he's in control of it, everything. Coronavirus is not in control. Jesus Christ is. We have a certain hope that is unshakable and unending. Unfading, Peter says. Imperishable. So as we all come to grips with the reality of we're not God, we're not in control, we're not promised tomorrow, everything has always been uncertain, we just put on different colored glasses to view it wrongly. In the midst of all that, let this produce in us, let us walk by faith. Let us walk by faith. And what is faith? The author of Hebrews says that faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Let us walk by faith in Jesus Christ. He's in control, the Son of God who has all authority in heaven and on earth, who is for us and not against us, regardless of what our eyes might see. Let us walk by faith and trust in him, because he is our only certain hope that we have. And